California edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Today we are joined by Michael Manchak. He is the president and CEO of the Economic Vitality Corporation of San Luis Obispo. He is joined by Bradford Anderson. Bradford is the vice president of research and economic development at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Suffice it to say, these two men have come together to develop a study, a report that talks about the economic impact of Cal Poly on San Luis Obispo County. And I thought it would be interesting generally, not just for this county, but the entire state, to get a sense of how major universities like Cal Poly can impact a community. How did this happen?
Well, one of the things at Cal Poly that we wanted to take a look at was updating the prior report that had been done about the regional impact of the university in the area. And it had been 10 years. And so we decided to focus on fiscal year 2012-2013. And that's the subject of this report. And we looked at the regional impact. So that includes San Luis Obispo County and northern Santa Barbara County. Obviously, our impact statewide and nationally is much larger.
Right.
The impact of Cal Poly in that fiscal year was $1.4 billion. It came about because we wanted to work with folks like Mike here on the Economic Vitality Corporation, members of the local chambers of commerce, members of the business community, and have this sort of information, this data in our hands so that we can work with them in a collaborative way on economic planning in the region. We want to build the region successfully.
Is $1.4 billion a lot of money for this region?
It's very significant. So within San Luis Obispo County, that represents 12% of the annual gross domestic product, and within the measured region, including northern Santa Barbara County, a little over 9% of the gross domestic product.
Mike, did that surprise you?
The overall number didn't surprise me that much. I think what's really important when we're looking at how we value the economy and what drives the economy is to determine what are the factors below that. What are the specific things in this study that are showing us where we've got growth and what drive our local economy?
And what were those specific things?
Well, all the ancillary expenses or expenditures of money, whether it's research that Cal Poly does, whether it's purchasing a computer downtown by a student. If you start adding all of this up, including pensions, including salaries, that's a lot of money.
And it's interesting you talk about Cal Poly in 2012-13 because, take this the right way. In 2002, Cal Poly was considered a pretty good school. I think in the 10 years between 2002 and 2012, Cal Poly really hit its stride. I mean, as I was joking with you, when we were growing up, Cal Poly, UCSB, those were not desirable schools. Boy, that's changed. They're incredibly desirable. They are very difficult in which to be admitted, and it's just a different era. Is that fair, sir?
It's very rigorous in trying to get into Cal Poly undergraduate admissions. We have a tremendous number of applications and a limited number of seats.
But I'm wondering, is the fact that Cal Poly is now seen, I think it's fair to say it could be considered the best Cal State of the 23. I'll say it, you don't have to. But if it's not considered the best, it's in the top 2 or 3. So is the fact that it is now considered top 2 or 3, does that change the economic calculation? Is there a greater impact of Cal Poly because it is such a desirable institution?
Great question. The answer, the flat answer to that is no. The reputation doesn't really play a role in the direct economic impact.
That is very interesting. Why, Professor? Because I'm fascinated to hear.
Well, what we looked at for the economic impact report, and we used an external firm because we wanted to have validation.
Sure.
So Productive Impact Consulting, Professor Emeritus Ken Riener, formerly of Cal Poly, and Pat Maeda did the study. They used the M-Plan software, which is the premier software utilized for these types of studies. And what we wanted to take a look at wasn't the reputational aspect of the university within the community, which there is some trickle down for the educational attainment factor and increased productivity.
So a little bit,
yes,
maybe.
Yes, and it has a role in attracting people to the community and then also in alums who graduate and want to stay here and
Right.
start up businesses.
So, but as a general proposition, is it that you didn't look at the improved reputation in this study, or the study suggests that an improving reputation doesn't really change the economic impact of an institution?
We didn't look at the improved reputation over time because we really wanted to focus upon the productivity elements from the educational attainment factor, student spending, visitor spending, faculty and staff spending.
What about the fact that during those 10 years we hit a real economic bump and the CSU system was really getting hammered vis-a-vis state funding? It doesn't seem as if that caused a hiccup, or did it?
It did, and what we didn't do, we didn't run an alternative scenario looking at historic wages and historic spending that would have happened but for the economic decline. But something that we were talking about before the interview today is the fact that the faculty and staff at Cal Poly had no pay increases from 2007 to 2013. And yet we know during the 7 years covered in that time period, the prices were increasing. We were all feeling the squeeze, whether it was insurance, property tax, cost of food, cost of gasoline, obviously during that period. So there was a real squeeze on faculty and staff, and we continue to feel that. That did impact the $1.4 billion number, which could have been much larger.
As you surely know, Chancellor Tim White of the CSU system has talked about his desire to grow the size of the CSU population. Presumably, San Luis Obispo would be one of those institutions that would grow since it is so highly regarded. What's your sense about how the predicted growth in student population, how could it impact this county?
Well, like many areas of the state that are highly desirable to live, so we're blessed with that. We have a housing issue.
Right.
So you can put more students into the pipeline and grow the population, but you have to start looking at other infrastructure issues, which the university is doing a very good job at by trying to develop more student housing on campus. Currently there's a shortage of housing in this county, particularly in the city. So I think that has to be looked at, and it is.
What I thought was also interesting is that while the economic impact to the region was seen as $1.4 billion today, or 2013,
Yes, 2012-13.
you're predicting it to spike to $2 billion at the beginning of the next decade. That's a big jump. How so large in such a short time?
That is using a very conservative number. That's assuming only a 1% compounded growth in the student population year over year during that time period.
Now we believe is not a fair assumption. It's going to be bigger.
Exactly.
Right.
It takes into account obviously imputed inflation factors,
Right.
but also the fact that you have to have additional faculty and staff, and then there's the induced effect of having the faculty and staff in the community.
What is, I mean, you're better at math than I am, I'm sure. What is that, like a 30% bump, or in?
It's very significant.
Right.
Yes, yeah. It's not.
It's not an inflationary bump.
No, it's not an inflationary bump because it assumes that you have additional faculty that are teaching the students, additional staff servicing the student services, and so forth.
So, Mike, where do you go with this? I mean, obviously, you have some remarkable information, valuable information. How do you translate that into action?
Well, I think this study, for a size of county that we have, which is relatively small, is more important, I would say, than places that are much larger, because this has a much bigger impact per capita. And so we take this information and this data and we say, if this is a driver of our economy, what do we want the economy to be down the road? And we have an economic strategy that supports this, that ties right into it. So it's very important to have some gauges on our dashboard. Without this, we have no data.
Congratulations. He is Mike Manchak. He is Bradford Anderson. They recently put out a report on the impact of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's California Nation.